Hey everybody. So we're going to let people kind of join in here for the next couple minutes, and then Casey and I are going to kick off our fireside chat and have an engaging conversation for the next 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll field some questions from the audience and kind of see what the reaction is from the group. So sit tight for a couple minutes, and we'll begin shortly.
Very good.
And because I'm an impatient person, when I say a couple minutes, I mean more like 30 seconds. So
Exactly.
I'm gonna go ahead and let's go ahead and get started. Just a couple housekeeping announcements before I introduce our guest speaker today. For those of you that don't know, my name is Brian Sayre. I'm an employee here with Shadow Ventures. A couple events that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention before we get started. June 2nd and June 3rd, we are hosting a virtual pitchathon event. It's going to consist of over 60 startups across the entire built environment, covering 5 technology segments. So if you're a startup out there and are interested in pitching potential customers as well as potential investors, please make sure to apply. And if you're somebody that's interested in hearing from the latest and greatest emerging startups within the space, definitely register to attend. And you can find all that information on our community website underneath the events section. And then with that said, if you have not had the opportunity or have not had the pleasure of speaking with Casey Robb before, it is my pleasure to introduce him. This should be a really engaging and fun discussion. Casey is a breadth of knowledge within the space, established industry expert, and has stories for, I think, every single category and discussion point that we're going to go down this afternoon. So with that, Casey, I'll let you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and your background and a little bit on what we're going to cover this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brian. I really appreciate it. And everybody who dialed in today, appreciate your time. Taking your time out of your busy schedule is really important. And I hope some of the things we share with you today will kind of resonate and help you adjust and make the appropriate adjustments for the future. Again, my name's Casey Robb. I'm originally from Southern Indiana, born and raised, and grew up building houses with my father. One of 5 kids that got to go to college, went to Murray State University, majored in construction technology, and got really, really lucky when I graduated to get a job in the power and process industry as a contract administrator. My first 7 years out of college, I actually did construction contract administration. Didn't know anything about it, learned on the road, on the rapid fire trail, and it was a learning experience. And that route to market actually helped prepare me for some of the drastic disruptions and changes that are going on today. That power industry went from a steady climb to the absolute bank and cliff of falling off the edge. And a lot of us lost our jobs in the mid 80s going through this route. And I always wanted to get into sales. So I went from being a field engineer, contract administrator, got into a product rep role, calling on architects in the mid 80s, and actually knew nothing about calling on architects. And that's one of the things I'll preface today is architects have the AIA, they have design schools, they can go to college and get a degree and actually go practice what they do. So can contractors, so can engineers. Product reps, on the other hand, don't really have an education source. It has to be learned on the fly. There's really no place to go other than CSI, Construction Specifications Institute. And that's one of the organizations I joined in the mid 80s when I got involved being a product rep. So I worked as a product rep in the Midwest. After the downturn of the first Iraq War, I moved to Atlanta, became an architectural rep, worked for a big company here, worked our way into the Olympics, moved through that organization, changed jobs, got into the sealant industry. Then I got into the air barrier industry later on in the early 2000s. And as we've gone through a lot of these shifts, I've actually had to change jobs and move on. But through this process, I've built a very strong network of design and construction professionals that I've worked with for years and years. And as I turned the corner in 2016 with a merger of a company called DuPont and Dow Corning, Dow Chemical, that forced me into another situation where I moved on, rapidly became a director of business development at Kingspan, and then that one was all shut down at the prime of my career. So at that point, I had to make a decision, and that decision was I'm going to start my own consulting business. I'm going to help people with product rep education, strategy, training, and alignment of their networks with my network to bring that conversation together. And I think it's worked rather well. I started in 2017. The business has grown consistently every year. And this year, guess what? We all got punched in the face. So it's been a real turmoil with COVID-19. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I'm seeing with some of my customers and what you might be seeing with some of yours. I'm going to talk to you from a perspective of building product manufacture, product representation, and that dialogue with the architect and how that's changed and how I think this is going to change for the future. So that's a little background on me, a little background on what we're going to talk about today. And I hope some of this will resonate with some of you on the phone call today.
Clearly limited experience coming from Casey.
Limited, very limited, yes.
So before we kind of get into where we are today and what we're facing with COVID, I thought it would be helpful maybe if you could establish a little bit of context for the audience around the way things used to be done and how the reps typically in the past represented building product manufacturers and how that process typically worked.
Well, I'm going to start with a question back to you, Brian. How far back do you want me to go? Do you want me to go back to payphones and fax machines, or bag phones and just start an email, or a little bit of both?
Maybe a little bit of both. But let's stay like the internet forward. We don't have to
Okay,
go
the
back
internet
to
forward.
fax machines.
Well, I'll tell you what, the internet changed everything, and so did email, so did the ability to move information quickly, and that really, I think, impacted a lot of the behaviors and the way we were acting at that point. But it didn't take the place of the face-to-face network building events that you were able to accomplish along the way, and how you handled those were really, really important. And I think in my early days, the big thing that resonated with me is I really didn't know what I was doing. So I had to be very curious and very much of a listener and ask a lot of good questions. And some of the best reps that I hung out with were those that asked really, really good questions. And I think that's still true today in finding out what you can do to help others. And I'll come back to that as we get towards the end, because as you start to age, you think you know more and more, but every time you turn around and meet people like KP Reddy and some others out there, you find out just how little you really know. So it's always important to be continuing learning and continuing to evolve as things and dynamics change. And that's right where we're at today with this change in dynamics. But back to the original, I found myself calling on architects, trying to find out what they were trying to accomplish and asking those questions and being very curious, because all the salespeople that we work with, all they want us to do is go out and preach facts and benefits and how great your stuff is. But at the end of the day, architects don't buy anything from us. They specify us. They hope, and hopefully we get engaged in the game downstream. So it's important to talk to the architect and influence what those decisions are. So to me, having that conversation early and with the right people always proved out to be the most important step in my career in being successful. And even from the start, it was the ability to not just go in and make the pitch. It was the ability to go in and have a conversation, get people to relax, get people comfortable with, hey, I'm in it with you. I want to help you win. I want to help you solve problems and make things happen. So that continued to be the way of operation. And then we were augmented with great systems like McGraw-Hill, FW Dodge, back in the days when suites brochures were everything. I mean, the architectural community had volumes of green books called suites catalogs, and that was your go-to for the information. But the expertise and the knowledge existed with those reps that had been in the field, been in the trenches, had seen the good, bad, and the ugly. And the architects would, and especially the technical architects, would engage those types of people into their trusted network and rely on them for really good quality information and decision making. And as that's evolved, we've seen the AI CEUs become very popular for education. Back when I started, the AIA was just starting the CEU program and being adopted by states. So a lot of times when we went in to present, it was, here's what we do, here's how we can help you solve problems, rather than a specific product pitch. And that evolved into very good product information being shared, and it evolved into very good project information being shared by companies like Dodge. FW Dodge was the first at reporting projects. So we'd track projects to find the kinds of architects that would work on the projects we were involved with. We would go call on those architects, and we would try to have those conversations with more and more of those kind of decision makers. And it was a tough journey, because a lot of the technical architects were being barraged then by all types of different reps. So if you didn't have a viable solution, or didn't have a viable conversation, didn't know what you were doing, it would be a tough uphill battle. And I
And
think that continues to flow today. But
it's
as
probably
times
even
evolved, yeah,
even amplified today with the
yeah,
amount of noise and the amount of innovations coming at these architects. And
it
this new
absolutely has.
whiz bang is going to completely revolutionize the entire industry and create $1 trillion in new growth. I mean, as a venture capital firm, we hear that all the time. So I can
Mhm.
only imagine what the architects and specifiers are receiving from their end, with people trying to get in the door and get an opportunity to even pitch their products, let alone have them specify it.
Absolutely. And the information flow has just ramped up so drastically that there's all kinds of information available. It's deciphering what information is important and how you're going to react to that information that becomes important. And as you build those networks to me are very important. People will continue to call you and trust you and get you involved as you
So
work through that.
on that note, you and I think most of the times we've communicated, you always talk about the power of your network and how you've built this network your entire career, and how you create value for that network, whether it's strategic value, which might not necessarily be a financial gain for you, but creates value for them and somehow by, maybe it's connecting somebody to somebody else who has some sort of challenge that they're facing, or if it's utilizing that network to then promote and sell whatever product you happen to be repping at that time. How did you go about building that network and continuing to provide value and kind of foster relationships within that space? And where did you start with all of that?
Again, I think my start was connecting with CSI at an early age, when I didn't know a whole lot about the industry, and tried to engage with it early. And I didn't realize at the time, as you build those networks and you build that trust, that circle of trust, it will follow you down the road, and it will make a big impact no matter what job you're in, no matter where you go. And I think today we still need those networks to operate successfully, and we still need to continue to feed and nurture those networks. I want to reference a great book for those of you on the call today. Hold on a second. This book came out in about 2005. It's called Networking Like an Introvert. And when I was taught to network, we'd go to a building or go to a meeting, and our goal was to grab as many business cards as we could and pass them out and make a few follow-up calls. And we thought we'd done a great job. Well, if you read this book, you find out that that's not necessarily the case. The case is you really need to connect almost like an introvert has to do. And I know many of your callers out there today are architects and engineers, many of which are a little more conservative, a little bit more introverted, and not quite as outgoing as people like me in sales. So I encourage anyone out there to read this book, because today it even matters more, because what it teaches you is to be very selective in the group that you work with and network with and connect with and truly connect with a conversation with a lot of things in common, with not things that are necessarily going to benefit you, but things that will benefit them and others. And learn to feed that network, learn to give it away, and don't expect anything in return. That network will grow and expand and really evolve into a much bigger and broader connection to people and places and things that you wouldn't necessarily know about. So what was it? An architect once told me, stop trying to sell me, try to educate me. And I thought that was really resounding with the way people are taught to get into sales. They're always told to sell, sell, sell. Listen, it's not about you, and it's not about selling. It's about them and helping them solve a problem, and about education. And education keeps coming back around the horn every day. So Networking Like an Introvert by Tim Koblund. We actually saw him speak at one of our CSI events. he was spot on. He really hit the mark. And this is a quick read. It's an easy one. And I suggest any of you out there, even in this COVID environment, get that book and take a read. It's really good.
Nice. So we have a rule on these webinars that we're not allowed to talk about anything COVID until we're at least 30 minutes into the conversation.
Oh, I
So
apologize.
before, no, this isn't, yeah, I'm just setting up the next couple of questions here, because I think there was, I think we'll probably both agree that there were a number of trends happening within the
Absolutely.
space that were going to disrupt kind of business as usual
Absolutely right.
before COVID happened. So I thought
Mhm.
we could dive into a couple of those trends and then kind of get into where we are today.
Oh, let's do
Um,
that. That's great.
Perfect. So I've got a few written down here. One of the ones that keeps jumping out to me and one that we continue to hear about, and KP has a theory that there's not anybody under the age of 30 in this country that's actually going to pick up a hammer. Um, how do you see the space evolving with a shortage of skilled labor and then also an aging workforce within the existing labor pool in the space?
Great question. I thought it was going to go someplace else, but we'll go there
Well, we can
first.
take it that other place too. You can pivot.
We'll go there first. One of the things that I see, especially listening to KP talk about disruption, is we've talked about disruptive technology for the past 15 years, and we've seen it. It's kind of like we've been on the sidelines doing the rope-a-dope while we go back to normal and we come back in, we bob and weave, and we try to find out where our comfort zone is, where our status quo is. And we always bounce back out there and go, we know it's going to change, but I'm not ready for it. And then all of a sudden we get smacked in the face with something big, and then it has to change. And the shortage of labor is one of those first steps that contractors had to deal with. Many building product manufacturers are having to deal with it too, because an aging workforce means the golden reps of yesterday that I've admired all my career are starting to, go along the wayside and retire, which is kind of scary because who's going to backfill that knowledge transfer? Same thing's happening in construction. Who's going to backfill that knowledge transfer? We're seeing the boomer generation work longer and more years for many different reasons, but that knowledge transfer is really important, and
Well,
that
in
that
the
piece of it's not
construction
happening.
space, that's vital right now, right? If the boomers weren't continuing to work, it
Hmm.
would just amplify that entire situation.
Yeah.
I was at one of your events recently, and there wasn't a lot of people my age there,
Oh,
and
no.
it was, where are that future? Where is that future workforce going to come from? How do you attract new talent to a career that can actually be extremely lucrative if you position yourself correctly and build that network the right
Hmm.
way and really establish yourself as an expert in the industry?
Well, let's come back to that February meeting you're talking about, because this is going to be part and parcel to my COVID discussion. The lack of skilled labor, though, has driven a lot of dynamic change in offsite construction, modular building. You're seeing a big influence of that, a big influx of that coming, and it's starting to take hold and it's starting to take off for many good reasons. The other eye opener to me is over the last 2 years, we've made an initiative here in Atlanta to have more about construction technology to come in and educate our group within the CSI network so that we know what contractors are having to deal with and face when they aren't allowed to gather all the workforce they need. What do they do to replace that skill? So this AI, this artificial intelligence, the tools that are coming to the job site now are allowing them to do incredible things with technology that we weren't able to do in the past. And one of the presentations I saw this last fall literally replaced 12 men at a foundation application because they were able to uh, GPS and drop pins into place where you had to literally have 2 or 3 men dropping, plumb bobs, and all this technology has gone electronic and GPS now, so they don't need as many skilled labor people to do the things that they had to do in the past. So it was a real eye opener to me, and I think you're going to continue to see that rapid adoption of technology help offset some of the non-skilled and unskilled labor that's out there. But we're a long ways from that. We have to adopt and we have to attract young professionals into this trade. We've got to help people realize that the vision you have on the screen has to be transferred to the contractor's hammer in the field. And that's
Hmm.
always been the journey of the written communication of specifications. And it's always been the journey of, even if you're doing a sophisticated building information model, you need to be able to transfer that thought into constructible work results in the field. And that, I don't see that changing. I see the need expanding and the technology changing how we deliver it, but there's still going to have to be skilled craftsmen that are able to put things together.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you started to talk a little bit there about offsite manufacturing. This is a category that's a particular interest to me, and we're actually developing some research reports around that area right now. As it relates to the building product manufacturers, I continue to see it as an opportunity for them to change the way in what they're selling, from converting to selling products to selling complete systems to fit
Mhm.
within this space. Where do you kind of see there being a role for the building product manufacturers to play in that space going forward?
Uh, Another, no silver bullet, but I think I think it drives a conversation to innovation. Where does the next innovation take me in delivering quicker, better, faster results? If I can get one product that can do the job of 4 or 5 products in one step and reduce the number of steps required, can I replicate that in a shop, or can I do that in the field? So those are all conversations and thoughts you have to go through as you're adopting innovation, and trying to decide which innovation really makes the most sense for your specific need. There's so much innovation out there. How do you rifle through and find the right one? So to me, people are looking for that innovation that will cut down steps, make it easier to install, easier to construct, and easier to deliver on a sustainable, energy efficient platform that's required under today's owners.
That's an interesting kind of tangent that I'm going to take us down for just a second. I follow a lot of different sorts of design thinking, and the foundation of that is going out and having conversations with your customers to really gather real intelligence around not only what they need, but observing where their challenges are. Um, I think the building product manufacturer space is a little different, where the manufacturers aren't the ones having conversations with the architects. So a lot
Mhm.
of times they're designing products completely blind. Is there a give and take where they are reaching out to you to say, hey, what sort of conversations are you having with customers? What challenges are they facing? Where are there opportunities for us to actually innovate to make them smarter and spend their dollars in a more strategic way?
Well, yeah, I do get a lot of inquiry about innovation and how we connect to the true needs of the marketplace. We conduct focus groups. I'm aligned with a couple of different companies like Convert and Build Marketing, people like that that focus on the digital journey, focus on the customer interaction, and gaining insight on that platform. And I think there's a lot of effort going on around that. But I think the real key to it longer term is the vertical integration you're seeing with companies like, oh, golly, what's the name of it? I can't remember now. But in the multifamily space, there's a lot of vertical integration. One company has the manufacturing capability, the GC capability, the architecture capability, all in-house. So what's that do to the product manufacturer, and how do you integrate with that? Well, in a lot of cases, they'll bring the product manufacturer in early and actually start to design the solution with the rest of the integration. Is that a proven solution? No, it has to be tested on the fly. Is
It's an
it something
expensive one
that,
too.
yeah, it could be very expensive and it could be very unproven. So we have to really adopt and change to that rapid fire decision making that's going on with some of these companies that are becoming vertically integrated.
So one other kind of trend to jump down before we get to where we are today. I think we were observing a resurgence around clean tech and sustainability. We saw kind of a commitment on the global stage with the Fortune 50 kind of coming out and putting their dollars behind this initiative. We saw RICS recently just came out in support of more clean tech and sustainable initiatives. How did you see building product manufacturers going in that direction? And what do you think kind of the impact will be today now that we're potentially entering into a recession?
It's it basically boils down to two tracks. And what I've seen in this recession is either large companies facing the critical blow of jumping in the ring and not being prepared for it and pulling back and putting people on halftime or laying off and not investing going forward, trying to protect the asset, and those that are being innovative and investing and moving forward. And I'm fortunate that I work with a couple of companies like that that are very innovative, very forward thinking, and moving in the right direction to not just maintain the status quo, but to grow as they emerge from this disruption. So I think the same is true for people adopting new technology, energy efficient strategies. They're going to have to make some critical decisions along the way, very calculated decisions, and gather the data and the research that they have to prove out the theory before they jump completely forward. Um, and I know I have some good friends on the line here that'll get to that, but uh, they'll correct me on this if I'm wrong. But I do know proven technology is the way most people think they want to go, and if you can prove it faster and move it forward quicker, you're going to be a much further ahead on the curve. So I think that's an important dynamic that's going on here.
So I think this is some of the conundrum that a lot of the startups we work with find themselves in is they're looking for those pilot programs to prove that they can create some sort of an ROI for their customers and actually have measurable KPIs, but then they actually have to go out and find that customer that's willing to experiment and take a risk on them and pilot whatever their solution might be.
Hmm.
What's that balance, and any advice for those younger companies out there that maybe don't have the track record of some of the larger incumbents? How do you
Uh,
get noticed?
Realize that everyone out there seeking that level of innovation and adoption and change has been struck with this disruption. The first 30 days of the disruption, there was no time to have that conversation. Everyone was retreating, pulling back. We all got to go to the home office environment now. They've canceled appointments, they canceled lunch and learns. It was crazy. Now that that first 30 days has passed, we're seeing now that we're at 60 days, people are adopting, people are moving to that direction. So if you can gain an audience, even a virtual audience, if you can gain a social presence out there on LinkedIn and a conversation there, you're going to be more likely to engage in a conversation that will turn into some kind of results. A good friend of mine in the high tech business had told me about a LinkedIn strategy he uses where he puts together a very powerful value proposition of what he offers and what he does. And in return, he offers I think it's called Calendly, the app that connects with LinkedIn. It connects his Outlook with their Outlook, and he's trying to find 10 to 15 minutes of time in mutual concert with his particular client. And once that's accepted, that 15 minutes is very important. That conversation you have at that point is very important. But that's his way of moving the conversation forward into an engagement to talk about solutions and how you solve those problems. And to me, that resonated because I'm a boomer. I don't do those kind of things. And I had a lot to learn from this conversation. So if you're having trouble connecting out there, try it virtually, try it through social selling, social networking, and you'll be surprised at the outcome. This young man had told me he started this business 2 years ago, and we kept in touch. He was a former architect. Now he's in the software field. And his success rate at this methodology has been about 75, 80%. So if you can get 75% of your meetings assigned through an initial conversation online and get that conversation started and moving forward, that's a powerful tool for a young startup network.
Yeah, I think almost any of us would take that sort of conversion rate
Exactly.
for any
I
sort of
would.
marketing efforts.
Well, and
Yeah.
it kind of goes right back to the point I was making with the senior product reps that I talk to out there that come up to me after a conference or a seminar and go, man, this just isn't any fun anymore. Nobody's calling me back. I'm like, change the game, change the way you're connecting, change the message you're saying. You have to have some relevance to solve a problem they are trying to fix, accomplish, or avoid. And if the more questions you can ask, the better you can figure that out, the more successful you're going to be at making those connections and getting that small win. 10, 15 minutes of conversation time may get you to a larger conversation and maybe get you to their customers to integrate a better likelihood of success down the road. That's what I'm seeing that seems to be a differentiator from the way I used to do things. So, and you know, for us we have a choice too. We can either invest in our own education and change, or we can retire. That's kind of what COVID did for a lot of us, right? I don't want to retire. I want to continue to change and continue to offer value to the customers I'm talking to, because this is fun. I mean, I really think staying on that cutting edge is a lot more fun than the opposite. So hearing people like this young man talk about his success, going down a path of being an architect and then figuring out halfway through it, it wasn't quite what he wanted, jumping into this high-tech field and going for it in another route. I mean, that's pretty dynamic. And to see people, I want that person in my network, because I want them to mentor me a little bit on what I need to do to change things up here. So it's a pretty cool conversation when you look at the end of the day.
Yeah, the ability and willingness to continue to learn.
Mhm.
So let's jump into where we are today, because I think we've got a ton to talk about there.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
we have a imminent recession that pending, we might already be in it, you know,
Hmm.
that to be determined. Facing a global pandemic, you know, large gatherings have been canceled. People are working remote. Face-to-face meetings are all but done right now. No handshakes unless it's a virtual handshake or a in-person elbow bump. We're seeing massive unemployment across the board, and it's depressing. But there's real no good end solution until some sort of vaccine is developed, and that's 10 to 24 months down the road before we get there. So let's jump into the happy stuff. Where we are today, and where you think there's opportunities to possibly innovate ourselves out of some of this, and how we can improve the entire space of it. And you said this earlier, but I think it's a perfect word. We will emerge from this. Things
Hmm.
will return to a normal. It might not be what we were before, but we will return to some sort of new normal. And so in the meantime, what should we be doing to prepare for that and get ourselves ready for it?
Well, I want to give credit to the Brooks Group for cloning the word next normal. I don't like new normal. I don't like abnormal. I think there will be the next normal, and
I like
Brooks
it.
Brooks
Yes,
hit it on the head with that one. So,
that's great.
in my opinion, we have been hearing this churn of disruption and what's going to happen to us for years and months, and the faster, I mean, the less time you think about it, the more of this disruption we've heard of, right?
Yeah.
People like KP come into our CSI environment. A bunch of us, you know, gray hairs sitting in the room going, "Oh my gosh, can we really take that?" And it was all kind of nice. You could go home, you could bounce back, you could go, "Oh well, this is going to happen someday." Well, all along comes COVID. It's like we've been in the ring with Mike Tyson for the past 10 years. We're doing the rope a dope. We're bouncing off the walls. We're making it okay. And all of a sudden he connects with a left hook and we get smacked in the jaw. And from the audience, it looks like we just got hit really hard and we fell down. Well, come to find out later, 30 days in, we got a pretty good bruise. Well, 60 days in, we broke our jaw. It had to get wired shut. The longer that jaw has to stay shut, the harder it is for us to sip food and get back to normal. So to me, that's the perfect analogy of what's happening. And the other thing that's going on here too is all of a sudden, as we emerge from this thing, we're realizing we can't, it's kind of like having your jaw shut. You can't talk, you can't eat. So you got to adapt. And guess what? All the disruptors we've been talking about for the last few years are hitting us in the face now going, wow, we better adapt or we're going to have to just stop, or we're going to have to adapt and overcome and compensate. So it's been a pretty interesting 30, 60 days. I think we're in for a real interesting 90 to 120 days. Talk to me in 120 days and tell me what this looks like. But I think we've
Give
been
me your
driven.
vision real quick on, um,
Well, I'll,
we
I'll
know where
give you
we
the.
are 30, 60 days in. Where do you think we're going to be 90 and 120 days in?
I'll get to that. I think
Okay.
from an architectural representation standpoint, as a product rep, we've gone from the ticket to talking to an architect was the AIA CEU lunch and learn, right? You went and called on the firm, you got hit by the blocker. They said, oh, you got to come in and do a lunch and learn and educate us about all this stuff. And we're like, really? Do we? And the education you get from that, is it really what you were after? So you go provide this lunch for 20 people, 15 of them show up, you've bought lunch for 22, you see a bunch of people come through. Were you effective or not? You have a lot of opportunity there to be effective, don't get me wrong. And I do a completely separate session on killer lunch and learns if you want to talk about that. But to me, this conversation has now moved to a virtual reality show, and we have had the blocker has made us go into a scheduling frenzy that was 6-8 months out and planning way in advance to, okay, we had a dozen lunch and learns planned, COVID hits, what are we going to do now? Well, guess what, we're going to do a Zoom meeting. We're going to have you do the AICEU over the Zoom meeting. Well, do you have the same level of connection with that Zoom meeting? Yes, you do, if you do it right. And I'll compare it, another analogy, I'll compare it to the late night show talk host. Have you seen Jimmy Kimmel and Fallon and Colbert and Marr? Some of these guys struggle going from a live audience to a Zoom meeting. Oh my gosh. I sit and watch some of these shows and I go, wow, they are completely out of their field now. They aren't even worth being, tuned in. But the ones that are surviving are the ones like Kimmel, who started out on radio. They tell a great story online because they're used to the no audience environment. So I challenge each and every product rep out here who is dialed in, treat your lunch and learn opportunities, the virtual ones, like you're on the radio. You got to be enthusiastic. You got to talk your talk. You got to know your game, know your subject matter. Don't read the slides. Don't put your little bobblehead up in the corner. Let the slides talk for you and tell the story. Everyone who tells a story does a much better job and has a much better outcome. So you can still be a rock star on a Zoom meeting and realize that that is a powerful tool to still connect with design professionals. The other thing I'm seeing people do is adapt to these new opportunities in different ways. One of the companies I'm working with has a virtual hands-on training program where they actually sign up the company in advance with the right audience, the right technical players in the crowd, and they will send them actual mock-up samples and a little kit that they can put together right in their office. And they run a Zoom meeting for
Still get the interactive
the
side of what you
interaction
want of that
side
in
of things.
person.
It's really,
Yeah.
really cool. That's one thing I've seen. I've seen a couple of other companies do 6 Mondays in a row, and we're going to have a technical expert talk to you about these various categories, building science issues. We've had another great company I work with has signed up some of the top building science professionals in the country to come in every Friday and talk about deconstructing wall assemblies and understanding the deep dark sides of building science in these conversations. And they're getting 700-800 people to dial in on a Friday for those kind of learning environments. So I'm seeing manufacturers really step up to the challenge and change the way they're doing it. And what I see in the next 60 to 90 days are the companies like this that are doing the kits and doing the hands-on. Guess what? That drives more adoption from young professionals at the office because they want to get their hands dirty too. They've never had to play with some of these products. So you cut them up, you send them in, you make a nice little kit, and you can do this from a Zoom environment, or you can actually do it at a group environment when we're allowed to go back and start slowly getting back together in these type of events.
So I think in the past, the entire space across kind of the entire value chain has been very regional driven. And the reason for that is because people enjoy the face-to-face interactions. It's a very relationship driven business. You work with the people that you know and the people that are in your network.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, as people move to more virtual settings, does the regionality begin to disappear? And now all of a sudden, somebody that just used to cover the Southeast could technically cover the entire country.
Another great point, and one that I learned firsthand this week. And the reason I learned it was because we went from the traditional CSI Atlanta chapter dinner program. We did our first virtual one yesterday. We had about 45 people on the call, which is about a typical meeting turnout. But we had people dial in from Seattle, Washington, and
Yeah.
other parts of the country. And I'm like, wow, they caught this on social media and they dialed into our program. And they had a great time. We had a good time with it. The other one I just experienced this week too was posted on LinkedIn by a design build firm out of Philly. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice.
Bless you.
Uh, the design build firm in Philly is starting to disrupt the way contracting is done by taking on the entire building envelope responsibility. And they bring in the building envelope consultant under their contracting responsibilities. They bring in the outside consultants on the legal side, the contract document side, and they put together a package that a building owner can really be hanging their hat on. So they also had a seminar delivered this week through virtual methods like we're talking about, and they literally had the speaker in Seattle, the speaker in Philly, and the other speaker in Chicago bring people together from all across the country. So absolutely, this is reaching a much broader scale, and it's making our world a whole lot smaller. We're connecting
So
in a much bigger way.
do you think then that could be a challenge for the product reps going forward, where their value that they were bringing forward was their regional relationships, and maybe some of
Yeah.
the large manufacturers will start to go, well, if I can just do all this virtually, I can have people in-house working out of our corporate office that have intimate knowledge of all of our products, and they're our employees, and we kind of own that now and cut the middleman out of it.
This is a very important point. And again, I'll go back to the Brooks Group and some of the studies they posted this last week from Harvard Business Review on what it's going to look like to come out of this recession. I'm sorry, this disruption, the way we think it may happen. And it's going to require the employee-employer relationship to change. It's going to get away from the 9 to 5 office scenario and go into what is it that's making you productive? How are you reaching your audience? How are you connecting? It's going to change the structure of a lot of sales forces and the way they're regionalized, and they're going to have a much broader reach, I think, in the future. Adoption to change is always difficult, but it's going to challenge the paradigms we've accepted for many, many years because we can reach a much broader audience. The other thing that's becoming very, very important is the digital journey that the architect, the design professional, the developer experience as they're trying to gain information from the product manufacturer. So my advice is to refine your digital journey and make it simple to do, make it easy to do business with you. If your website journey is difficult at best and you have to sign up and get through it, it's a challenge, and people don't want to challenge. They want to get to the information, they want to get results. The other thing that has to happen in that digital journey is to connect it to inside sales to qualify, nurture, and develop, and then outside sales that can go execute on the deliverable. And so often, marketing and sales aren't talking to each other, and things have to be connected better. That's why I've aligned myself with several other companies that do this very, very well, because I'm a one man show, but I can connect you with others that can really help you understand this journey. And that gets back to my point. By 2020, the customer will manage 85% of its relationship with an enterprise without interacting with a human. Am I going to become a buggy whip? I
I
don't
hope
think
not.
so. I hope
There's
not.
no way. No.
But when I first saw that comment come out in 2018, I'm like, oh, that's not going to happen for several years. That's way off in the future. This is driving that kind of conversation a lot further. So when you look at that kind of conversation, you want that digital experience to be very, very strong and very powerful, but you want to be able to capture on the backside what happens with that transfer of information and how you nurture that lead forward and satisfy the deliverable in a very timely manner. That's critical. And that, I think, is going to be the challenge for building product manufacturers going forward.
Can you state that quote again? We just had somebody chime in asking if you could
Which
say that
quote?
phrase again. The 85% of customers will engage.
Oh, that's right out of the Gartner report. It's 85% of its relationship with an enterprise will be without interacting with a human. So that's the scary part. The realistic part is I don't see these trusted relationships going away. You're still going to have that connection with these customers. We're still going to get back to face meetings someday, and we're still going to have an engagement that means I can read my audience and I can see what's going on, because that is really important. And that's all how we build these relationships going forward. They're still important. Architects still value them. There was a great study that came out again in 2018 from the AIA. It was based on a survey of architects, many architects around the country. It was called The Journey to Specifications. And now it was written by architects, surveyed by architects, and of course, architects love everything. They want it all, right? But when you really read through the data, it it gets down to the meat and potatoes of they still value trusted relationships. They want reps that are technically competent. They want reps that know how their products affect other products. And they want to have a continuing relationship with those manufacturers that they trust and have a long-term success with those kind of firms. So they're really boiled down into that. That was 2018. I don't see that going away anytime soon. I still think it's going to be very critical as we come out of this. It's just going to
Yeah,
look a little different and feel a little
it's
different.
understanding the needs of your different stakeholders. The architects want to make something that's visually appealing. Engineers want to make sure it's structurally sound. Contractors
Yes.
have to be able to construct it, and
Hmm.
an owner wants to be able to afford it.
Well, and
So,
the owner wants to take pride in it. They want it to be energy efficient. They want it to be
yeah.
sustainable, and they want it at a good price. I think that's a really good point. How do we hit all these out of the park? It takes
So
a
you kind of
collaboration.
started touching on different trade associations and professional organizations. You've mentioned the group you're a part of, as well as AIA a couple times. What is the future of these groups? Because right now they rely on in-person networking and events to pay their bills, and that's where a large part of their revenue comes from. So how do you see them evolving, and is there a place for them in the next normal?
I think it's in a disruptive mode. Those organizations that were driven bottom line financially by their big event, their big show, their big gathering, they're going to have to really look in the mirror and figure out how to re-engineer their connection. Um, the others that are starting to do this forward thinking are already starting to move in a virtual direction, but how will that virtual direction change as we get past 120 days? I'm not exactly sure, but I remember back in a friend of mine shared with me this story about 1999 AIA show in Boston, I think it was. Someone came out of the woodwork talking about why are we paying all this money to go to this show? Why are all these reps and companies paying all this money for the architects to come visit? Well, it was a big social gathering and it was the thing to do, right? Well, this guy started talking about virtual trade shows. And he literally coined the phrase, you're going to put on a set of goggles, you're going to pay money, and you're going to walk around this show virtually, and you're going to pick and choose exactly what products and information you want and get the information with the reps connected to me virtually. And boy, if you look at that today, you're going, isn't that a great idea? I think that thinking is going to really perpetuate into something new for trade shows and engagement. I also think it's going to play into this networking of specifically principals and specifiers at high levels firms connecting with building product manufacturers at a high level. That I've been to several of those and they are great events. And I would hate to see them going away. I hope they'll come back. But in the interim here, while we transition, I think we're going to see a much bigger move to connect those virtually as well. And those building product manufacturers who are looking for alternative ways to connect with that network, that next generation of network, this is the way you will be able to do it. I'm pretty sure. So there's a lot of different thinking going on with that. I saw a group just a couple of weeks ago. They were fortunate enough to have a face-to-face networking event at the end of February, 1st of March, and then last week they really regenerated the enthusiasm by doing it virtually, and evidently it was a big success. So people are trying different things and trying to be successful with this
Yeah,
mode
I
of
think
operation.
some of the challenge with those sorts of events and moving them virtually is if you've ever been on it, there's a bunch of people trying to do virtual happy hours and stuff like that. If you
Yeah.
get on a Zoom call with more than 5 people, it's a complete disaster. I mean, you've got little
Oh
talking
yeah.
heads popping up everywhere and people are talking over each other. And so, how you actually facilitate that one-on-one engagement and get people to the right person when you're talking about these trade shows that are thousands and thousands of people, it's a real logistical challenge to try to figure out and actually sort through that. I'm not sure there's a good solution out there yet for it, but I agree with you that I think there definitely is an opportunity there somewhere.
Think about what you just said. Facilitating a meeting. That's what I've been doing for the past 3 years. I've been at 5 national sales meetings. I've facilitated tons of meetings. You can either rock the room or fall on your face miserably with the facilitation and the way it's organized. Oh my gosh, is it a big deal? If you're in the front of the room, the back of the room, all those things came into play. Same thing's happening on virtual meetings. If you think it through and bring the right plan together, like I hope we're doing here today, you at least get some good engagement and some organization that will leave a lasting message with your audience. So,
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's more focus on the prep work ahead of time to really
oh,
understand who's out there, connecting with ahead of time, and
absolutely.
setting up those little 15-minute time slots to make sure that you do get those opportunities to speak with the people that you need to be speaking with.
Prep is everything for those kind of meetings. I will say right now, prep is so important for every email, every phone call, every discussion you have, because again, you want to understand what those what those people are looking for in your mind, then asking the right questions to define exactly what they're looking for, and then being able to deliver on that content and that message going forward. And that's a difficult thing to do over the phone and to a Zoom meeting. But I think it's a very important discussion you've got to have with yourself at the table to plan out your calls and plan out your conversations in a much better way. Planning's critical. You don't want any surprises.
So
So you
one
end up,
one last rabbit hole I'm going to take us down. I think we're going to notice a fundamental change in the way that space is designed. We
yes,
saw a big shift, I think, over the last decade towards more open office environments. You see things like co-working and WeWork were exploding, which is essentially putting as many people into as small spaces as possible and seeing if they can still functionally operate and work, and then doing a lot of shared resources like the telephone booths if you need to go do a phone call or something like that, shared meeting and conference rooms. How do you think, and you can take it from either the architect's perspective, the developer perspective, or the building product manufacturer perspective of um, how is space going to be changed with the way it's designed going forward?
well, I think this has been a real awakening for especially the mid-sized to large architectural firms that were using a lot of architectural office space in keynote buildings. They have had to flush the organization to home office environments, skeleton crews within the firms working in the offices. And as we evolve from this, I think there's going to be a huge realization that we can survive with 30 to 40% less occupants in the building working virtually than we could at one time and actually be more productive, which is scary. I
Yeah,
know
I mean,
it's
there's
a
a lot of
scary.
office space out there. What does that mean for the future of
I,
commercial real estate?
I think that's going to drive a lot of retrofit and renovation of those spaces to understand and deal with the dynamics we're dealing with today. I don't I don't want to propose this is going to get to a prison environment or anything, but I do know it's going to drive a completely different conversation for the interior planning and design side of the fence. And taking care of existing space is going to become a reality check on how we deal with this going forward. I think it's going to look a lot different. I really do.
Yeah.
And a lot of us building product manufacturers are used to working in the home office environment. We've been forced to do that for years and years and years. I think I had one company tell me I had to work the first 2 years driving to work every day here in Atlanta just to get acculturation training for the company. And I was like, oh gosh, why do I have to do this? I've been in my home office my entire career in sales. Why do I need to do that? And it drove me nuts, but it was very important to be connected with the corporation. But 2 years in, they blew up the regional offices and they outsourced everybody their home offices. And we were all like, oh, I'm used to this. Well, a lot of people weren't, so they had to get
Yeah.
used to it and operate a lot differently. So these disruptions have taken place along the journey. So this one, I have to say, is a lot more of a punch in the face, but we will survive and we will adopt and overcome. I know we will.
So we're up against the clock here a little bit. I want to kind of put
Okay.
it back on you and give you the chance to, is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't asked you that you want to make sure that we cover today? And then we can jump into some questions from the audience.
Okay. Just want to close out by saying um, we've been in a rut. We're not comfortable with change. Um, fear and opportunity are the big drivers of change, and we have to get over the fear of adopting to something new. That's the hardest part. But the only way you get through that is to take a look in the mirror, take a look at the circumstances you're in, and it's kind of like taking pictures. You want to focus on where you've been. You want to take a lot of shots because you know the negatives are going to come out and some of them aren't what you want to see, but you will find the ones you do want to see, and those are the ones you want to take off and run with. So uh, my advice is adapt, improvise, and take a lot of pictures because you're going to need them. I think we're all going to get through this okay. It's just the startling fear, and out of fear comes a lot of opportunity. And you're seeing that with firms right now. Some of the architectural firms are pulling back, they're laying off, they're cutting people to halftime. Some of them are hiring and growing like crazy. I can't even get on their agenda. So it's a wild mix right now. It's the Wild West, and I don't think anybody's quite got their finger on the pulse, but when you find those opportunities, you adapt and take advantage of those opportunities, you're going to be successful no matter what.
Awesome. I think we have one question from the audience right now.
Okay.
And I don't know if this is one of your friends or not, but they asked, oh no, where did it go? Sorry, technical errors. So would you agree that CSI is the best association platform for AEC professionals to discuss with multi-disciplines in an authentic and equitable environment?
I would say in most cases, yes. CSI has been very good to me in my career. It's offered me a wide range of participants to talk to and develop networks with, not only associates, even competitors, even architects, engineers, contractors. We can all come to the table there and be equal in the voice and understand ourselves very, very well. We have a lot of good debates, a lot of good discussions, and I do think CSI provides that environment where you can do that. Right now, it's a little bit disrupted, but that environment's still there. Most chapters are doing some kind of virtual meeting, virtual engagement, and I think we will get back to a point where we have these gatherings again in the future where we can continue to build on that. But yeah, I've been a big fan of CSI because it's multidisciplined, and you get a wide range of folks that can help do that.
I don't know what that comment
I
that
see,
just came
I see the
across
note
was,
from
but
Gary. I'll answer that one later. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that.
Connect online with more questions.
Exactly. I'd be more than happy to help people out though. And if you want to offer my email, my connection afterwards, that's fine. I'm glad to take questions. But this is all about giving back and not expecting anything in return. And that's what I've been doing for a lot of my career. And I think CSI gives us a great environment to do that. And this type of event does too. I really appreciate you asking me to dial into this. KP has been after me for 10, 12 years to connect with his group. And hopefully this was an enlightening session that people enjoyed. So.
Yeah, I'm glad we finally got you on here, Casey.
Yeah.
Continue to pay it forward, and thanks for those insights that you provided us all today. If
Absolutely.
anybody has any specific questions, feel free to reach out to Casey or reach out to me directly, and we'll get you in touch with them and continue that conversation and continue to build each other's networks. But
Yeah.
with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. And thanks again. It's been great.
You bet. Really appreciate the time. And thanks again for everybody dialing in. Everybody be safe and be creative. This is a great time to be out there. So enjoy it.
Just getting ready
Thanks.
for that next normal.
Exactly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.